Hi, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webcast sponsored by ABB Contact Lens, in particular their specialty vision products. My name is Craig Norman, and I'm going to be the host for this evening, where we're going to finish off this year's series on practice development, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. So let me begin by introducing you to Dr. Matt Lampa. For those of you that haven't had the opportunity to see Dr. Lampa or hear him speak, you're in for a big treat tonight. Matt is a professor at Pacific University, where he's involved in specialty contact lens fitting, along with teaching and clinical research. He spent most of his career there in Forest Grove and splits his time between teaching, research, and serves as an associate in a private practice near there as well. The Pacific University group, I think most of you are aware of, are doing some tremendous work in contact lenses of all different types. And we really feel honored to have Dr. Lampa finish off 2020 by talking about a subject I think is of great deal of interest, and that is if you do have a yearning to be involved in specialty contact lenses, like what are those lenses that you should become really a master of? And then how can you build and grow your practice related to that? And with that, I would like to turn you over to Dr. Lampa. Welcome, Matt. How are you doing tonight?
Doing well, Craig. It's a total pleasure to be here. Thanks for the introduction. And just like you said, this is a really wonderful topic, a topic I just so enjoy speaking on, but also a topic I really enjoy seeing patients and doing my best to get them to be successful. So hopefully we can share as many of those tips and tricks as possible tonight. Well, just like Craig had mentioned, we have a lot of different specialty lenses, and on the screen here, this is by no means meant to be exhaustive of those specialty contact lenses, just kind of an example, a bit of a smattering of what I hope to cover today. And oddly enough, today I actually saw patients with each one of these lens types on the screen. So we'll take you a little bit of my journey earlier today, but also a bit of my journey in practice. But I think if you're like me, one of the biggest questions at the moment related to specialty contact lenses, particularly as it relates to those who have irregular astigmatism, either left behind by injury, surgery, disease, whatever, we are tasked with getting them to see better. Generally speaking, that's done with a rigid contact lens of some kind, some non-flexing GP, but we really do find ourselves at the moment in clinical practice at a bit of a crossroads. Do we go down the path of the sort of historical path of a corneal GP, knowing that as we go down that path, we have this fairly long track record at this point of very successful lenses, a very healthy product, great vision? Or do we go maybe down a bit of a newer path and explore more scleral contact lens options? And what I want to try to do is add a little bit of science to this decision, and by no means is this meant to be all-encompassing and totally exhaustive of that choice. I think that, as Craig pointed out, there's been some great podcasts so far this year that ABB has done in an effort to explore some of these topics, particularly in the area of scleral lenses. But like I mentioned, in thinking about vision and how the patient's cornea is contributing to their vision, it really is that irregular astigmatism that is best managed with a non-flexing GP of some kind to get that patient to see optimally. But is there something that we could do in clinical practice that could actually predict our success first off with a corneal GP without maybe needing to go down the path of actively fitting that patient with a corneal contact lens? And I think the instrument that really does this the best is the corneal topographer, in an effort to avoid this situation. Are there clues that we can have in our corneal topographer that would really help us to avoid these poor, sort of ill-fitting corneal contact lenses, knowing that in a corneal contact lens, we need to use the cornea to support the physical fit of the contact lens on the eye, but it's also the reason why the patient doesn't see all that well. So this is a bit of a challenge. So when looking at corneal topography a little bit more carefully, what I want to try to do here is describe two different maps. And what we have on the screen here is the exact same patient taken at the exact same time. The only thing that we've done is ask the topographer to think about or calculate the eye in two very different ways. The way on our left is the sort of traditional way, the kind of default display of most corneal topographers. And that's the axial display, or what's sometimes referred to as the power map. And this is really kind of a point-by-point map of the power of the eye, how the patient is predicted to see based on their corneal topographic profile. But the image that we have on the right is the elevation display. And what the elevation display attempts to speak in terms of height, how high or low the cornea is. And if you're like me, this map is a little bit more difficult in an effort to get your mind around what's actually happening here, because on our left, we're speaking about the eye in terms of, I guess you can kind of think of it as curvature. And then on our right, we're thinking about this in terms of the elevation display. The analogy that seems to make the most sense in my mind is when we think about the topography of a mountain. If we have that topographical map and we lay it out flat on our countertop, that piece of paper, and we look at the topographic map, on that map, there are two very important pieces of information. One, where those lines get really close together means the mountain's changing curvature really fast. But there's another piece of information on that map, and that's a number, and that number is how high or low you are on the mountain. But that elevation has a reference, and that reference is taken from sea level, how many feet, for example, you are above sea level. But the elevation itself doesn't necessarily tell you if maybe, for example, you might be really high up the mountain, and you would think, you kind of assume that the mountain would be really steep the higher you go. But that isn't necessarily true, because you could be really high up a mountain, and then all of a sudden you reach this high alpine meadow, or the mountain kind of plateaus out or flattens out. So the other piece of information on that map that gives us the curvature value are really where those lines get really close together. But what isn't so obvious in the corneal topographer is, what's sea level? What's the reference? Well, if we kind of think back to that elevation display, what the elevation display is doing is it's using what's referred to as a reference surface or a reference sphere, which is actually theoretical. So it's taking that reference sphere, dropping it down onto that corneal topography image, and then the topographer asks a very important question. Does it have to measure up in terms of that reference sphere? Is it higher? Well, if it does, it assigns it a warm color, the reds, the yellows, that kind of thing. If though, along that meridian, it actually has to measure down below the reference surface, or in other words, in our analogy of the map, down below the level of the ocean, below sea level, it's going to assign it a blue color. We're now below the level of the ocean. So that reference sphere is highlighted there on these two meridians as that yellow arc. So again, if it has to measure up, that's going to be higher than. If it has to measure down, it's going to be lower than. Well, we deal in terms of contact lenses, and I mentioned earlier that, is there a way that maybe we could actually use our corneal topography to give us a bit of a path? And should we go down the corneal contact lens path, or should we maybe be better served by going down the scleral contact lens path? Well, let's look a little bit further at our patient specifically here with keratoconus. And what we can see here, the deepest blue, the furthest below we go, the level of the ocean, is giving us the grand total of 147 microns. The negative number tells us that we're below that reference surface. Well, what about the high spot? We're going to be 90 microns above it for a grand total of 237 microns of difference between those two values. Well, when we look at the axial versus the tangential display, we're so familiar in thinking about the eye in terms of the axial display on our left, like our eye here with keratoconus. So the warmer the color, the steeper the curve, the cooler the color, the flatter the curve. And in keratoconus, you can't create or destroy corneal power. You can only redistribute it. So what we have here in terms of steepness is we're going to steepen that inferior central portion of the cornea, thereby flattening the superior portion of the cornea. And it's really that difference along the patient's pupil that ends up giving us that just wild refractive change within their pupil. And now we're going to need to manage this eye with some non-flexing corneal GP. Well, if we use the topographer in an effort to better calculate a contact lens for our eye, what it's actually using, the map that it's using to do this, is the elevation display. And instead of using the reference surface, that reference sphere, now what it's doing is using whatever contact lens, the branded contact lens that's built within that particular topographer. And there's many different lens products available within the topographer. You just select for this patient lens designed specifically for keratoconus, and then we kind of go through our fitting rules. We're going to attempt to clear the patient's corneal apex, make sure that we have some amount of clearance across the central portion of their cornea, and then land the contact lens somewhere. Since this is a quote-unquote contact lens, we're going to have to contact somewhere, and the idea here is that we would do so along the horizontal. Our profile line kind of tells us that we're landing kind of roughly along the 3 and 9 o'clock position. And then if we kind of swing our cursor around, kind of looking along the vertical, what we see in this particular example is that at kind of no point along the vertical do we actually touch the patient's eye. And that's potentially a really beneficial thing. As the patient blinks, we're going to get that lens to move really nicely along the vertical meridian. So in this case, this is maybe a lens that should be fairly wearable, fairly successful corneal contact lens. But once we take the simulated contact lens on our bottom left and compare it to the actual on-eye fluorescein pattern on the bottom right, you see how just kind of awesomely similar those two things are to one another. Well, in looking at this and kind of knowing that we're ideally wanting this corneal contact lens to be supported by the cornea itself, is there some amount of elevation difference that says that there's just so much elevation difference along the cornea that we just can't use the cornea to support the physical fit of the contact lens, and maybe we should better use the patient's sclera, which is essentially unaffected by this patient's condition, knowing that the sclera will be, relatively speaking, much more symmetric than this asymmetric cornea. Well, that was something that we tasked one of our previous contact lens residents here at Pacific, Dr. Frank Zhang, with doing. And during that time, and we've continued to do this, our sort of default in practice here when we see our medically necessary contact lens patients is to first initially do our best to attempt to fit them in a corneal contact lens. And if we fail for whatever reason, then the patient sort of won the right to wear a scleral contact lens. But in looking at these individuals that were successfully fitted in corneal contact lenses versus those that maybe we didn't find ourselves to be so successful, was there a micron difference in terms of elevation across the surface of their cornea that allowed us to better predict this? And the sort of line in the sand that was drawn in this evaluation was 350 microns. That's to say, if the patient has 350 microns or less of elevation difference along the greatest meridian of change within that elevation map, the patient has an 88% chance of success in terms of a corneal contact lens. If it's greater than, though, they're beginning to win the right to wear a scleral contact lens and using the relatively unaffected sclera to support the physical fit of the lens. Let's go through a couple of examples here in an effort to sort of flesh this out, look at this a little bit more carefully in terms of keratoconus. Well, here we have an eye a little bit more central in terms of keratoconus here, fairly steep in the center and then sort of kind of radically, dramatically flattening out as we go out into the periphery. But if we look at this eye in terms of its elevation change along that greatest meridian of change, we're getting a grand total of 290 microns, which is below our threshold where we think to put a patient in a scleral lens, and maybe this patient would be successful in a corneal contact lens. And you can see here that we've really kind of satisfied that. We have a very well-centered contact lens. We have clearance over the apex. We're landing the lens in that mid-peripheral portion, and then we've got a really nice amount of edge lift. This is a very wearable, potentially successful contact lens for our patient. What about this individual here? Also fairly central keratoconus. This time, though, quite a bit more dramatic in terms of severity of the condition, quite a bit steeper here in the periphery, and then really, really radically, dramatically flattening out towards the periphery. So along the greatest meridian of change here, we've got a grand total of 655 microns, which is well above our line in the sand of 350. So now we're sort of bumping up against the cornea in one area. We're generating a bubble in another, we're lifting really heavily in another. So this is really a patient that's probably better served in terms of scleral contact lens. Well, I guess the sort of summary here is that we have this really kind of powerful tool in clinical practice. We have the default display, the axial topographer, which gives us the best kind of prediction of how that patient is predicted to see based on their corneal topographic profile. But it's really that elevation display that gives us the best predictor of how the contact lens, the corneal contact lens, is going to be fitting on the eye. And hopefully we can avoid these situations altogether. We could just kind of look at our corneal topography and attempt to speed up our fitting process in clinic. Well, in keeping with that theme of keratoconus, I think we've kind of looked at that keratoconus patient in terms of corneal contact lens versus scleral lens. But what I want to do here coming up in just a bit is look at, if we do have a patient in a corneal contact lens that has keratoconus, what are maybe some of the rules that we want to live by? What are some of the, maybe I guess we could say at this point, best practices in terms of corneal contact lenses for our keratoconus patients? But before we get too far into that, what I want to look at are some of the other variants in terms of the ectasias, looking at pellucid marginal degeneration in particular. If we draw our attention to just that topographical profile within the patient's pupil, what you actually start to appreciate is if we ignore everything outside of the pupil and only look at what's found inside the pupil in terms of the vision display here with our axial display, things actually appear to be fairly symmetric. This is a patient that may even refract fairly well, though they may have a high amount of astigmatism. One of the contact lens options here that can be really pretty successful is actually a custom soft lens, a custom soft toric, which we'll explore here in a few minutes. The other patient here, this one on the far right, which can be really pretty challenging, is keratoglobus, where that ectasia isn't necessarily specific to one area of the cornea, it's essentially the entire cornea. And just like you blow a bubble with bubble gum, the bubble gets deeper and deeper, sort of thinner and thinner. Same idea here in terms of keratoglobus. Well, what we look at in terms of corneal contact lenses for this patient is what you'd want to do is have the lens be fairly steep, but you possibly wouldn't want to incorporate any asphericity on the back surface of that contact lens. You'd want that lens to stay steep in the middle and then just remain steep as it goes out towards the peripheral portion of the lens. Thankfully, keratoglobus is really pretty rare. But that's kind of, I guess, maybe one of my best tips I can give you in terms of fitting a corneal contact lens on keratoglobus. But let's take a bit of a step back and kind of draw our attention to just that sort of maybe run-of-the-mill keratoconus. And traditionally, in terms of keratoconus in corneal contact lenses, we've dealt with spherical curvatures on the back of the contact lens. Generally speaking, those lenses have been fairly small in their overall diameter, and some of them historically have even been advocated to land on the central portion of the cornea. And As time has gone on, as the sophistication of lens design has gotten better, as our understanding of corneal topography has gotten better, I think we've attempted to kind of move a little bit away from those maybe smaller spherical style lenses, though they still have a place in practice. Don't get me wrong, I see plenty of patients that are totally successful in those contact lenses, but most commonly today what we see are the aspheric style lenses in keratoconus. And what's meant by that asphericity is the lens is steepest in the center and then gradually, evenly, smoothly flattens out towards the peripheral portions of the contact lens as dictated by the amount of asphericity on the back. And that's really just done in an effort to match that keratoconic profile where we have that steepness in the center and then evenly, smoothly flattening out towards the periphery. And in terms of selecting our initial base curve, generally speaking, what we want to do is select the contact lens on steep K. And that may not be where we end up, but it's a really pretty good place to start, and that it hopefully ensures that we have some amount of clearance over the apex, and that it also hopefully allows us to land the contact lens out into the peripheral portion of the eye. So if we need to move up or down from there, we can, but really great starting place for those individuals with keratoconus. And here's sort of some examples that we would look at in terms of too flat being up on our top left, we're hitting, kind of bumping up that patient's corneal apex, and then the other extreme on our top right, we've actually cleared the patient's corneal apex so much that we've generated a bit of a bubble underneath that lens. So it's really that contact lens on the bottom that we start to just clear the patient's apex. And if this were a video, what we'd see is as that patient blinked, we'd see just a real mild amount of flush of fluorescein underneath that portion of the contact lens. Also, the thing that we would give us a clue that we're not touching the patient's apex is that we wouldn't see fluorescein staining over their epithelium in that portion of the contact lens. Well, if you're like me, it's a little easier to understand corneal contact lenses in terms of base curvature, steepening and flattening. What gets a little bit more difficult when we start to incorporate these aspheric curves on the back of the contact lens is what's actually happening to the periphery. How is it that we're supposed to specify the peripheral curve? And very common language by which the lens designs are spoken about in terms of the periphery, that aspheric periphery, is in terms of steps. One step steeper, one step flatter, that kind of thing. But what does a step actually look like? So what we did here at Pacific was we had an individual with keratoconus come in and was fitted with a corneal contact lens for keratoconus, an aspheric style lens that gave us that clearance in the center. And what we see here in these four images is the exact same patient, their exact same eye, all right eye, and all we've done is just changed the peripheral curve of the contact lens to give us a little bit better picture in our mind's eye what a step looks like. So on our top left, we have the flattest of the peripheral curves, and then as we go one step steeper, we move one image to the right. Now we see a little bit of narrowing of that fluorescein in the periphery, and then two steps steeper, we see even more narrowing, and then three steps steeper, we really start to see that periphery become even narrower. So hopefully you find that helpful. I know this is has been a helpful exercise for me to kind of look at this through the years to really solidify what a step actually means in terms of the peripheral curve. Well, just to kind of look at or review a little bit of some of the advantages of these more aspheric designs for keratoconus, really done in an effort to share the weight, so sort of distribute the weight over a broader portion of the cornea in an effort to hopefully add some stability, also in an effort to hopefully center the contact lens a bit better. It's also done in an effort to kind of pop up over and ignore some of that irregularity that might be in the central portion of the contact lens. And then by having this lens not be flexing on the eye, we're going to really reduce the patient's astigmatism, essentially eliminate it, giving the patient the best vision vision possible. So with that, I think this might be a good time to take a bit of a pause and check in with Craig to see if we have any questions or comments or sort of directions we might want to take the presentation tonight.
Okay, and Matt, we do. Thank you very much for just a terrific opening set of slides and pieces of information. I would like to reinforce to the audience, if you have any questions, please type them into the question box. I failed to mention that in the opening tonight, but there's some veteran webinar goers, because you already did type in some questions I'd like to share. And Matt, the first one is, do you use topography on all of your contact lens patients?
Great question. So I think in terms of, having your record reflect the necessary information, oftentimes what you'll see, what we need to have in there is some assessment of corneal curvature. So, which can be accomplished as simply as manual keratometer or even using your auto refractor, sort of auto Ks. So in terms of when I personally use corneal topography, it mostly gets used whenever I'm considering using a rigid lens, whenever I'm considering using a scleral lens, anytime I'm considering using a custom soft contact lens. I'll even use it when I have a patient with a high amount of regular astigmatism, and I may or may not be putting them into some custom specialty product. I just like to have that information. Anytime I'm suspicious of their visible iris diameter being particularly large or particularly small is another time I like to use it, just in how accurate the topographer is in measuring the visible iris diameter. The other time I would use it is in orthokeratology, and then kind of managing corneal disease. But I think really outside of that, if it's just a regular, myopia, hyperopia, low amounts of astigmatism, the answer is generally speaking no. I know there's plenty of contact lens practitioners out there around the US that would disagree with me on that do corneal topography in everybody, but it hasn't been my practice.
Okay. I think one thing for sure is that by using topography on those patients as you're trying to build your specialty lens practice, it starts to differentiate you from others. And you have something you can discuss with the patient and explain what you're doing, which is a lot different than what they may have had experience of in the past. The second part of that question is how often do you actually use the simulated fluorescein? And do you do that in today's world instead of putting on a diagnostic lens?
Oh man, great question. Yeah, I gotta say that I definitely start by using the elevation display. And if the elevation display is kind of suspect, like I'm kind of hovering around that 350 microns, yes, I will definitely click over to a lens design within the topography software that is either identical to the lens I have in mind or as close to the lenses that I would have in my diagnostic sets to do that. The other time that I really use that simulated fluorescein pattern is when I've had a patient who's come in with a corneal contact lens, and maybe I spent quite a bit of time trying on different lenses in the office, and I'm still left kind of scratching my head a little bit. I will sit down with the topographer and kind of go through what is it that maybe I'm missing in terms of the shape of their eye. So those are probably the two main times I use it. Good question.
Okay. And a terrific answer. And the simulated fluorescein patterns, although not perfect because they don't always demonstrate movement, they sure are helpful to get an overall idea if you're bearing on someplace centrally, mid-peripherally, or towards the edge. There are some other questions, but I think that they might be better or more appropriate to the next time we answer some a little bit later. So if you want to go ahead and continue, that would be great. And then for the audience, again, keep putting questions into the question box, and we will ask Dr. Lampa them a little bit later.
Yeah, this is great. We'll keep it up here. Thanks, Greg. This is great. Well, yeah, I'm keeping with that, maybe that instrument theme. Time's gone on, and corneal topography systems just seem to only get better and better, which I've been a huge, addition to the practice. But one of the other pieces of instruments that's been pretty helpful in practice are those instruments that give us some understanding beyond the cornea, these kind of scleral topographers. And I think that in terms of common clinical practice. They haven't necessarily been as widespread as the corneal topographer. We'll kind of see how commonly they're adopted in the future, but I really found them to be pretty helpful in those more complex scleral fitting scenarios. But what I want to do here is take a little bit of step back and maybe look, kind of drill down and look at corneal topography specifically. And I hope you'll agree with me, but I think that where the corneal topographer has really taught us the most is in terms of orthokeratology. I mean, it's just really been critical to the success of our understanding of what actually is happening underneath some of these lens designs. And as we kind of move into the modern age, or I guess maybe better said, move away from more of the historical orthokeratology lenses that were just, flatter and flatter lenses in an effort to sort of flatten the central cornea, and, using manual keratometry in an effort to monitor the patient's cornea really doesn't give us the fullest picture. So in looking at orthokeratology today, basically what we're doing is kind of attempting to turn the shape of their cornea into a minus powered contact lens is kind of what we're doing, and using the power, the sort of hydraulic force that's underneath that contact lens to do that. So what has got us here? Well, I think our understanding of how to actually construct a reverse geometry contact lens, that the lathes today that are able to manufacture this can do these, and can actually now, amazingly enough, make the reverse curve and the landing area of the contact lens toric, yet keep the central base curve, that mold curve in the middle, spherical, rotationally symmetric, so that we mold the patient's cornea in the middle to be spherical, yet we're better able to align, kind of lock in the fit if the patient does seem to have any kind of toricity in their cornea, which is just amazing, kind of mind-blowing to me that our contact lens manufacturers are able to do this, along with the materials that we're able to use, really high in their oxygen transmission. We have lens materials that are approved in overnight. We have many different designs in terms of orthokeratology that are approved by the FDA for that. And then we've also seen an increase in the number of orthokeratology lenses even in the last few months. So I think that there's really a lot of interest, a lot of innovation in terms of contact lens design and orthokeratology and topography, which is exactly why I want to cover it tonight. So, and looking at this kind of push-pull force that happens underneath the contact lens, we're so used to thinking about the middle of a contact lens being referred to as the base curve of the contact lens, which is, I guess, technically true in terms of an orthokeratology lens. I personally think of the central portion of the contact lens more about the treatment curve, the kind of mold curve, and that whatever curve that central portion of the contact lens is, that's the curve that we want the cornea to assume. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to touch the patient's cornea in the center. I know that it looks like touch in the center and that it's black, but the way in which that we prove it's not touch is that, just like in keratoconus that we covered a few slides earlier, we don't get that epithelial breakdown in the middle. So, and then as that central base curve, as that central mold curve is allowed to keep its flattened shape, we need something in an effort to bring that contact lens back down to the surface of the cornea to sort of contact the eye. And that's the reverse curve here, which gives us that negative pull force where we can actually generate the suction to sort of steepen up the patient's epithelium in that portion. So, one of the studies that I find to be really pretty enlightening in terms of orthokeratology was actually done here in Oregon, kind of a joint effort between Pacific University and the Oregon Health Sciences University in the Portland area, and looking at what's actually happening to the cornea underneath these orthokeratology contact lenses. And we really do see some pretty rapid changes underneath the lens. We get a compression of the epithelium within just a matter of hours, and a really deepening in the mid-peripheral portion in that reverse curve. But what I find to be really the most interesting here in terms of the study is that Looking at the discontinuation of orthokeratology lenses, it really is that epithelial phenomena. We see it on the outset, but as we discontinue the orthokeratology contact lens, we see the epithelium really begin to rebound, and that it's a totally reversible procedure, which is one of the main reasons why in the initial FDA approvals of orthokeratology, the FDA did not put an age restriction on the procedure. So it's basically approved from age 0 all the way up to whatever we want to do. So pretty cool that we as optometrists can prescribe any age we want. And I know today there's so much attention being paid to the utility of orthokeratology in children as well as adults. So in terms of keeping with this kind of corneal topography theme here, what's the utility of corneal topography in orthokeratology? Well, the most important map that we will ever take in terms of orthokeratology is really that baseline. And that's for 2 reasons. Number one is that's going to be the most important map that we'll take in designing the contact lens, whether we're actively designing the contact lens on the topographer or passing on those very specific pieces of information on to the laboratory that are found within that baseline topography. And reason number 2 that that baseline topography is so important is that every subsequent map that we'll take in orthokeratology will be referenced back to that original map. So like we have on our difference display here in terms of the axial display, what we have is baseline top left, some time point later after the patient has gone through orthokeratology, bottom left, and then the difference or the subtraction between those two. Well, in terms of the axial display, its utility here is really in terms of power. So however much flattening we get in the central portion of their eye is the exact amount that we've treated their myopia. We've reduced their myopia by that amount. It's 1-to-1. So in terms of the other map that's useful in orthokeratology, it's really that tangential display map, which just does a much better job of position, comparing one point of curvature to another and really highlighting the changes that happen one map to another. So in terms of the tangential display in orthokeratology, it gives us the best prediction of how that contact lens centered in the closed eye. And then kind of looking at here in terms of orthokeratology, because this is an epithelial phenomena and we only have roughly 50 microns of epithelium in the human cornea, we're a little bit limited on the amount of correction that we can actually achieve. And as the optic zone gets wider, we're going to need a more and more amount of epithelial change. So as the treatment need goes up, our optic zone oftentimes shrinks a little bit. So just kind of be aware that there may be some advantages and disadvantages to this, but I guess don't be alarmed when you see that that area that you're attempting to target might only be a fairly small area in the central portion of that eye, especially as the refractive correction goes up. Well, I do want to kind of talk a little bit about the reversibility of orthokeratology as we kind of think about our contact lens options within our specialty contact lens practice. As we maybe go down the path of orthokeratology, it's not necessarily a one-way street. We can really go down that path and think about there's all kinds of benefits to orthokeratology, but it may not be where we end up 100% of the time, on into the future. So and looking at some of these studies that were done previously, as you kind of watch the discontinuation of the orthokeratology lens, you really see that epithelium begin to recover to essentially look like the baseline map. So really pretty cool, pretty powerful stuff. So what I want to do here, though, is switch gears. We've spent essentially the most of our time kind of looking at focusing on rigid contact lenses of some kind, corneal topography, and what I want to do now is move a little bit more into the soft lenses and talk specifically about custom soft lenses and maybe when are custom soft lenses indicated, because like we talked about earlier, in terms of corneal irregularity left behind by injury, surgery, disease, most of the lenses we think about are rigid in nature, but there are some soft contact lenses that are approved for the use in those individuals with irregular astigmatism, but where they really shine are those individuals with high amounts of astigmatism. So what I kind of want to look at is what are some of the sort of tips and tricks, maybe some best practices we can live by in looking at custom soft lenses. So And thinking about custom soft lenses, I actually think about the design and prescribing of custom soft lenses very similarly to how I think about rigid contact lenses, in that the design of the lens and the material aren't necessarily linked together like they are in the sort of commodity style molded lenses like we'd have from the large soft contact lens manufacturers. So we as the eye care practitioner can specify the design of the lens, whatever that is, and it might be specific to keratoconus, it might be a reverse geometry lens, it might be some custom multifocal lens, whatever that is, but we can also very individually specify each and every one of those parameters. So at least here in the US, and I think the rest of the world would kind of echo this next statement, the number one reason why doctors think about custom soft lenses has everything to do with astigmatism. So in that, the higher the amount of astigmatism, the more likely the patient's going to be better served in terms of a custom soft toric. And there's a couple reasons for this. In looking at the commodity style lenses, most of those lenses end around 2 1/4 diopters of astigmatism. And the other reason is that in thinking about the axis that's available in those power ranges, it's really only 10 degrees, 10-degree increments. So as the cylinder correction goes up, generally speaking, not only in terms of contact lenses, but in terms of spectacle lenses, we need to be more precise in our axis and sort of power. So it's really potentially better served for the patient to be in a custom soft toric in that we can specify the power, if we wanted to, as fine as tenths of diopters, and the axis as fine as 1 degree increments, kind of anything goes. But what percentage of the practice are we thinking about? Well, in terms of those individuals that have higher than 2 1/4 SIL, it's in the single digits, kind of mid-single digits. I would argue that that's potentially a very significant portion of your practice, maybe not by the number, but if you can get that patient to be successful, that's just a great way to kind of lock that patient into your practice for the years to come. And really, if you have been the one to satisfy that patient in contact lenses, because oftentimes those are the individuals that struggle the most in contact lenses, not only are you going to kind of win that patient to your practice, you have a really strong chance to win their friends and family, their kind of loved ones. And it's just a huge honor to be able to see not only the patient, but they would trust you with the care of those in their life. So the hard part might be on the front end to get them to be successful, but oftentimes once they're successful, they're going to be successful for years and years to come. There's very little oftentimes that needs to be edited once you get that patient to be successful. So yeah, this is just done in an effort here to kind of remind us that in terms of power, anything goes, as fine as tenths of diopters, and then axis as fine as 1 degree increments. Well, I alluded to earlier that there are actually some things that we can do in terms of irregular astigmatism and soft contact lenses. And you might be kind of thinking, irregular astigmatism and soft lenses don't necessarily go together in my mind. You'd be totally correct. And how we're actually able to achieve this in terms of custom soft lenses is by actually asking the manufacturer to increase the center thickness of the contact lens beyond simply with what the power of the contact lens would dictate. And as the thickness of the contact lens goes up, what we're actually doing is beginning to approach that non-flexing nature like we get in a rigid contact lens. We don't necessarily eliminate it like we do in a rigid contact lens, but we start to convert irregular astigmatism into more regular astigmatism, and then we can deal with it a bit better by making the contact lens toric. So what are some of the kind of rules? What are some maybe the tips and tricks here? Well, the effect typically begins around 0.2, 0.2 of a millimeter. That is where the effect really begins. And then as you need more irregular astigmatism correcting ability, you go up from there. So oftentimes when you see lenses made available directly from the manufacturer, specifically for keratoconus, they're going to be in that 0.3 to 0.4 is typically where you're going to see them. In my experience, anything above 0.5, you really don't get more irregular astigmatism correcting ability. So that sweet spot's kind of in that 0.3, 0.4 area. And then do keep in mind that that thickened area is only in the central optical portion of the contact lens, and the lens dramatically thins outside of it. In terms of lens material options, we do have the sort of traditional HEMA lenses, and then we do now also have silicone hydrogel options available to us in these lens designs for keratoconus. It is advocated to fit one eye at a time, and also to fit the most needy eye first. And why is that? Generally speaking, what we're doing is taking a patient out of a rigid contact lens and then putting them in to a custom soft lens for keratoconus. And in that process, you're going to begin to see some topographical change. So it's best to kind of fit the lens spherical first, monitor their eye with corneal topography as the days and weeks go on. And then once you see stability, then performing that spherical cylindrical overrefraction to give the patient the best final acuity possible. And then I do really want to say that though we've covered quite a few different topics, provided hopefully some useful tips and tricks in clinical practice related to these specialty contact lenses, I do want to say that specialty contact lenses is just a great way to build the practice. It's certainly something that I've seen here at Pacific. It's definitely something that I've seen at the private office in the last sort of decade plus, in that it's a great way to increase the referrals into the office. I actually calculated here recently the number of referrals that we get into our medically necessary contact lens service, kind of optometry versus ophthalmology. And it was actually 2 to 1. I was surprised by that. So it's twice as many ophthalmology referrals as we get from optometry. And that might just be that we've got a fairly good relationship with the corneal surgeons in the area, and a lot of these irregular corneas are kind of found in their offices. But do kind of recognize that some of the difficulty is on the front end, but once we get that patient to be successful, oftentimes in the years to come, there's very little that needs to be edited. So kind of serves as a bit of a commodity, or sorry, it's not a commodity, it serves as a bit of an annuity, to the practice, and that we're just getting them to come back year after year. And oftentimes these lenses are really only able to be ordered from your office. And if a patient, unfortunately, breaks a lens or they lose a lens, they're going to be, calling your office. Even though they may not be coming in, they're going to be generating revenue to the office, especially as the years go on. I've definitely seen that be the case. The number of lenses that get ordered, even in my absence away from the practice, just increases all the time. So definitely sets yourself apart in the community, sets yourself apart in the mind of the patient, diversifies the level of our different sources of income into the office, and the mind of the patient certainly gets them to be coming back. And like I mentioned earlier, just what a huge honor to be able to know that you're trusted with seeing the friends and family, the kind of loved ones of those in the office. And maybe we'll kind of take a bit of a pause here, Craig, kind of hand it over to you. And
okay, terrific. Matt, thank you so much for really covering a number of the areas that are important in building the practice. We do have questions, but I think what I'd like to do before we address those questions is to introduce to you Didi Reyes. Didi is a national consultant for ABB. And if we could have Didi just run through a couple of important things related to tonight's topic that ABB offers, and then we're going to come back to this series of really important questions that we have. Didi?
Great, thank you, Craig, and thank you, Dr. Lampa. It was a great presentation. ABB is pleased to support these webinars and to help the practitioners increase their success with specialty lenses. One of the things that I want to introduce you to is our fabulous team of consultants that can really help you move forward and build your practice with contact lenses and increase your fitting techniques and effectiveness, and to help you grow your business. ABB has put together some really good programs to help improve your business and increase your revenue and differentiate your practices. First of all, we offer a prime warranty program for any lenses that we manufacture in-house, and these programs offer extended warranties and exchanges over the regular warranty periods that we have, and these work for any of our manufactured products. ABB provides a number of educational opportunities for your practice that are second to none. From information regarding our product portfolio to increasing the knowledge of your specialty lenses in your practice, ABB can provide personalized education for your practice needs, and we even provide staff education to increase your staff's knowledge to improve the effectiveness and the efficiencies in your practice. We have live webinars and recorded webinars. The webinars you're going to see today will be recorded and on our website as well. We can even offer real-time fitting assistance with virtual fits that help differentiate you from other practices. And we can provide virtual wet labs for those practices that have larger amounts of practitioners or in a group or a multi-doctor practice. ABB provides business solutions that are here to help you increase your productivity in the office and increase revenue. A couple of these products are our ABB Analyze. Analyze gives you a full overview of your business and easily integrates into your office systems. Practitioners have a full overview dashboard of their business and can see any of their soft contact lens specialty, even spectacle businesses right there on your own personal dashboard. ABB Verify is a software program that easily integrates into your EHR system and helps you access multiple sites to verify vision and medical coverages for your patients. This saves your staff valuable time and the ability to utilize all the coverages that your patients have available. If you'd like further information on these programs, please contact your ABB sales representative. ABB has added a number of new products to our product line. The newest products that we have in our portfolio are our VibrantVue product line. The VibrantVue family of lens products includes a non-preserved saline for your scleral lens patients to fill and rinse their scleral and GP lenses. There's a protective hand prep to clean hands and get hands ready for insertion and handling. There's also a lid and lash treatment for your dry eye and contact lens intolerant patients. The VibrantVue saline is offered exclusively through ABB for your patients. Starting in January, ABB will be providing samples of the VibrantVue non-preserved saline in our new Scleral lens care packs. These packs will ship with samples of the VibrantVue saline, as well as a 3.4 ounce bottle of Tangible Clean, starter solutions, and an inserter and removing DMV, all in a very easily to carry pouch. The VibrantVue saline is a non-buffered preservative-free saline provided in 5 ml vials in either a 6 vial box or 100 vial packets. And these are available exclusively to the patients through the eye care practitioner, helping to assure compliance and in-office revenue. The second product is the VibrantVue Hand Prep. It is a hypochlorous acid-based product that provides an extra layer of protection for your patients. This product can be used to prepare hands for contact lens insertion, and not only for scleral lenses, but for your soft and gas-permeable lens patients as well. This product will help kill bacteria and viruses, including COVID-19, on patients' hands if they're going to insert their lenses. The Hand Prep cleans, hydrates, and freshens hands in a no-rinse formula that is non-irritating and effective on any bacteria. And it's great for any contact lens wearer, as well as being all natural and very effective. Finally, in this VibrantVue, we have the VibrantVue Lid Care product. These products are provided to the ECPs as a revenue stream for your dry eye, meibomian gland dysfunction, and contact lens wearing patients that need lid care and maintenance. We all have patients in our practice that need this type of lens care or lid care to keep them in wearing lenses. This system includes an in-office treatment administered by the eye care practitioner and also a daily maintenance spray for the patient to use at home. ABB does provide samples of the patient's spray for your convenience. If you're interested in any of these products or services, please contact your local ABB account manager, or an ABB consultant can also help you with any of these products.
Great, thank you, Dee Dee. We have a number of questions, so folks stick around for a few more minutes if we can. And Dee Dee, I'm actually going to start with you because the question is how do we get the VibrantVue products to the patient? So what is the mechanism for that? Are they through the office or through the web store, or how does that work?
They can be purchased on our website. They can be, you can call in consultation or customer service and order these products. They're sold exclusively through the eye care practitioner to the patient. So they're not available on Amazon or any of those types of big box places. So it keeps these patients in your office purchasing products from you, and it keeps them compliant, which is also wonderful for these patients.
Okay, so primarily this is going to go through the doctor's office.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. We have another question here, but Matt, I think I'm going to answer this myself. It says, why didn't you talk very much about sclerals tonight? And that was by design. We've talked a lot about sclerals this year in these webinars, and there's lots of different scleral information out there. We thought it was important to get tips from an expert like Dr. Lampa, not only on how to identify the patients and use specialty lenses, but focus on uses other than sclerals. I mean, obviously sclerals play a very, very big role in the irregular cornea arena today. And then Dr. Lampa, we have a question about regarding the new FTC ruling, which is the prescription release ruling. How is that going to work with these specialty lenses?
Oh boy, this is a good question. And
yeah, I agree.
Am I an expert in this area? So I don't want to sound like this is some kind of legal advice. I think, though, you know, you're certainly welcome to provide the patient their contact lens prescription in these, you know, specialty custom contact lenses. And I guess technically speaking, the patient could attempt to find somebody with an account. It's going to be very difficult, you know, for them to do that, and that's just the custom nature of the lens. And it's just the way that the contact lens is sourced more than anything is the challenge. So I don't know that there's a problem in providing them their prescription.
No, I think, you know, by the letter of the ruling, you have to. Once it's determined for them, you know, once the fitting process has been determined.
Yeah.
And then I think part of the question would be, what information do you include? And I think it would go all the way down to size and shape and material and laboratory where it's fabricated from. I mean, it's going to be interesting. It's different with the commodity items, and this is why it's such a good question, I think.
Yeah, I believe, you know, here in my home state, it's worded to where the contact lens prescription itself needs to be worded in a way that the contact lens can be replicated. So. Right.
And I don't think, by the way, that the FTC ruling really took into, you know, consideration specialty lenses.
Yeah, good.
You know, that it was really designed for people that are making multiple purchases of their lenses each year.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, Matt, was there a reason you didn't mention custom soft lenses for presbyopia? I would guess this is one of your areas of expertise.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about it. It was more, you know, it's more the timing. I think there's a lot to say as it relates to presbyopia in general, and yeah, I think that custom soft lenses, multifocal lenses, just man, there's a lot to say and pretty pretty cool stuff, pretty impressive stuff out there, actually, especially as it relates to those individuals that have astigmatism, especially as you really want to get specific in an ad power or a zone size. Yeah, good stuff.
And then there's this whole, area that is making a lot of noise in our field relative to where should the optics be placed. And as you said, the size of the zones, and there's some very interesting stuff that can be done there, I think, is the long and the short of it.
Absolutely.
For custom lenses. And then this next question, I think, is also related to, you just didn't have enough time tonight, but the question is, what's the role of corneal diameter in custom soft lenses? Is it just the powers you were talking about, or is there this diameter play a role in itself?
Yeah, this is a great one. Yeah, I think that irregardless of a patient's refractive error, paying attention to the size of their cornea, particularly when the cornea is larger than normal, is really where the commodity style soft lenses struggle the most in getting those patients to be the most comfortable, as well as having their vision be the most stable. So there's certainly a segment of the population that seems to struggle in soft contact lenses. And if you hear that, one of the things that should be, at least in my opinion, should be going through the back of your mind is, does this patient have a unique sized cornea? Do they have a particularly large or particularly small cornea that the commodity style lenses just aren't necessarily built for?
Sure. And the numbers tell us that that's 15 to 25% of the population, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's smaller or larger than the average size cornea. The other comment I just wanted to make, because I would get asked this question very often also, Matt, is, how do you become a specialty contact lens practice, right? And how do you actually go about this differentiation process? And my answer was always that I would start with knowing all of the different lenses that are available in the market, and then figuring out when to use each one.
Yeah, it's good.
Because it's really, right, you have to be aware of everything that's out there first.
I agree. And the other thing too that I've really sensed that patients have been pleased beyond what I would guess, to add to what you're saying, is the more that I've understood solutions, the unique solutions that some of these specialty contact lenses require, knowing that sometimes the replacement schedule might be a little bit longer, they're using a material that's maybe a little bit more unique, the better I understand the solutions, and the better that I can make very targeted recommendations and provide them the source of those solutions. Oh man, it's just such a great way to build your practice, to really differentiate you in the mind of the patient. They're just so incredibly thankful.
Yeah, that you could figure just that part out, which is the least obvious of everything, right?
Huge, it's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and what is the role of OCT? Is it just for sclerals, or do you use it elsewhere? This would be anterior segment OCT.
Yeah. I would say that in terms of contact lens practice, yes, the majority of my use of the OCT is related to scleral lenses. Yeah, I haven't used it a ton for other things.
Right. And I think it's because of the largeness of the lens, and you're looking for vault, and I think you can make a case for hybrids that could be used also.
Yeah.
But you'd need a super large lens, and trying to figure out what the relationship of the posterior surface is to the cornea. And then this last question we have, and I think this was probably related to only having an hour to spend with you this evening, is, do you very often use cosmetic tints in specialty lens situations?
Yeah, good one. Actually, yeah, with the very last patient of the day, with our resident, was that today. So we do use them. I think that there's some really pretty creative things we can do with individuals that have certain forms of light sensitivity, certain types of headaches we've even found to be successful. Those individuals that have, you know, a misshapen iris for whatever reason, we've really found to be quite life-changing for folks. So yeah, I think there's a, I'll say it this way. The most common email that I get from former students has everything to do with tinted contact lenses.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and here's the thing, you know how we like to talk in terms of how scleral lenses can be life-changing for patients?
Hmm.
Boy, try fitting a cosmetic tint on somebody that has not liked their appearance for 10 years.
Yeah,
You talk about life-changing, it's huge.
yeah, exactly.
It is really huge. Dee Dee, as we get to wrap up here, do you have any closing comments?
No, Craig, just remember that ABB is here for you for anything that you need, from custom soft lenses to cosmetic tints. We're here for any type of lens. We carry hybrids and all sclerals and GPs as well. So use and abuse your consultants. They're here to help you and help you choose and make decisions with these lenses if need be. And Dr. Lampa, thank you very much for your support, and Craig, you as well.
Okay, thank you, Dee Dee. I will echo that. Dr. Matt Lampa, thank you for your time this evening, and thanks to the large number of people that attended this evening. Remember, you can go to the ABB Optical website and onto the webinar page and be able to hear this recording, the recording of tonight again if you want. There will also be a handout there for your use in the future. Dr. Lampa, thank you. We really appreciate you participating tonight.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Good night, everybody.